Okay, that's. Did I miss anything out there? Is there any other questions? Does that help?
Yeah.
Any follow-up points you want to make, or?
No, I haven't been in Ethiopia.
Ah.
I remember Haile Selassie.
Yes. Yes, I think I'm sad about Haile Selassie. I discovered his persecution of the Oromo. I mean, this is why ethnic conflict is such a toxic thing. I'm sure that most Rastafari don't realise that he did that persecution of the Oromo. I would, if I'd have been king of Ethiopia, I would have got a grand assembly of the Oromo sages and the the Orthodox Christian sages and made them sit in a room until they write a peace treaty.
Yeah,
You know?
I believe that Haile Selassie his inheritance is not the best. There's a lot of history around how he persecuted his own countrymen.
Can you just give a quick recap on why exactly you are talking about this?
The Ethiopian king, the last king of Ethiopia, was called Haile Selassie, and he was the Lion of Judah, and he was quite a sort of hyper powerful monarch, and the Rastafari look on him as a messiah figure, because he was the greatest black Christian leader, but I think nowadays, intellectual writers, Rastafari, who've gone into the details would distance themselves from that adulation. I mean, it's Christ that's the real king here for them. Emperors come and go.
And what was this execution?
No, he wasn't. He
died.
He died naturally.
I see. Yeah.
But he had persecuted some of the people.
Yeah. Because I felt like I had something like that in the back of my mind. Yeah.
Sure.
So that was kind of connected with the religious movement as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it grew up when he was still untouchable and regarded as holy Lion of Judah. But anyway, it's interesting. But I think their contribution to peace is very important. Right. Okay. Let's do your one next.
Okie dokie.
Now, what number was it again? Remind
18.
me. Oh yeah. Sorry, I keep finding and losing it. Right. Okay, this is very interesting, the Kahuna religion, or the Hawaiian primal tradition, pagan tradition of the Polynesian people who live in Hawaii, and have been there for quite a long time. And I've not been to Hawaii, but obviously it has a very ancient and sophisticated culture, and I have studied Polynesian spirituality quite a bit, especially the New Zealand Maoris, who are related to the Polynesians of Hawaii, and they believed in the sacredness of nature, working with the elements, living in nature. They have an extensive oral literature that's come down, myths and legends about creation. Hawaii is a beautiful island. They have Pele, the volcano goddess, as well as Al-Goloa, the sky god. And they also have Tane, who is in the tarot of the gods, who is the god of wood and plantation, vegetation, and the god of the tremendous canoe culture that they build for long-distance canoe voyages. They're interesting, and their religion is called, well, there are different names for it. The one I use, the Kahuna faith, is based on a particular scholar who went to study their work, Max Freedom Long. He lived there for some decades and met them and wrote down what the priests told him about their practices. And they use spiritual healing, is at the heart of the Hawaiian culture. A particular form of massage that they do, which heals people with prayer. Obviously, dancing in the community is very important. It's a ritual. It's a religious ritual dance for them. I have a dear friend, Sachin Raja, who goes to Hawaii has a place there. He loves it. He says it's incredible culture. And nowadays there's a great, spirit of wisdom alive. It's also a place of tremendous military bases for the Americas, for the USA particularly. It became part of the USA. And they have a lot of spy bases and listening and fleets. And so it's got a lot of military presence, which I personally, as a peace worker, would like to see de-emphasised, I don't think the planet can afford this level of hyper-militarisation that we've got going. And that's where the Kahuna wisdom comes in, the primal tradition, which believes that only God ultimately, or the gods, is the real giver of peace. They also use fire walking as a part of their religious traditions. So to walk on hot coals was like part of the initiation ceremonies. And we also do that in the Druid community. So among Druids we also do fire walking, which I did at a Druid camp some years ago. They also do in effect what's water walking, which is the surfing tradition. Was invented in Hawaii by the aristocrats. Hawaiian aristocrats felt that by surfing these vast waves, it's like an initiation, it's a religious experience. And then it spread and became adopted in California, in the 60s, but it was a Hawaiian religious ritual, surfing. And it would be interesting to go back and find out the early texts about that. They worship the ocean and the waves. And the art of surfing is about balance. And so that's what we've got to learn to do in life. We have to surf life, not fall down when we get knocked slightly off balance. Readjust, recalibrate, and carry on surfing. That's our job, is to surf through life, following the subtle energies that are all around us, because the visible universe isn't the only one. There's subtle energy levels. And yes, when we die, we go to the kingdom of Milu, which is the realm of the dead under the ocean. So there's many mysteries in Hawaiian spirituality. Certain things are taboo that you just don't do. That's part of the faith. And I think that's not a bad idea. There are some things that are taboo and shouldn't be done, like starting a nuclear war, invading another country, or mass killing, or rape, or sexual abuse. These things should be taboo. We can learn from the Hawaiian culture that, what is ethics. We seem to have lost any sense of taboo, and I think that's wrong. In advanced hyper-capitalism, people do anything to sort of make money. No, that's wrong. We should realise we're under the guardianship of the gods. We have to cleanse our hearts, and mana is the power that we should cultivate, which is only developed by truth and integrity and following balance. And they also use song a lot. Hawaiian culture, all the stories I've drawn on are sung. And what's interesting, religious studies scholars compare, say, the Maori and the Polynesian stories, and they go back to common sources of people that travelled around the oceans for centuries. And some of them are very interesting because they're even related to, Eurasian traditions. For instance, if you studied Tane, who's the god of, sort of humans, really, he brings sacred teachings in 3 baskets, which are only given out to the senior initiates once you've been through all the grades. And that's interesting because in Buddhism, there were also 3 baskets. And I'm just speculating, maybe the Polynesian people of New Zealand were visited early on by some Buddhist pioneers, like 400 BC. Maybe they got to the Pacific Ocean. We don't know about this in written records, but it's weird that they've got the same 3 baskets as the highest teaching, yeah.
Yeah, Thor Heyerdahl Norwegian adventurist, explorer, he had a theory about that. I think he built
Yeah.
the Ra up in Iran. Was it Iran, Iraq?
He built the Kon-Tiki, didn't he?
He built the Kon-Tiki. That was to
Prove Latin American contact.
and Indonesia.
Mm.
But the Ra was to prove that
Egyptian.
the Arab countries had actually also
Got to the Pacific.
Where
did the Ra go from? Do you remember?
They were built in the river between Iraq and Iran, the border.
Okay, like the Tigris or
The
something.
Tigris, yeah.
And then came down to the ocean and went all the way to the Pacific.
Yeah, but I think they failed a bit. The first one, the building was
It got
wrong,
waterlogged.
so it got waterlogged and they had to abandon it.
Ah,
So they built a new one, Ra 2.
okay. And
Which,
did it do the job?
No, they set fire to it, as a protest in one of the wars in the Gulf of Arabia.
Okay, so we need to build a Ra 3.
We probably need to do that.
Yeah. And we can take the 3 baskets with us.
Yeah.
And I think we should be trading each other's wisdom. You know, on the Ra 3 they should have a copy of this.
Yeah, probably.
You know, and we'd all get on fine. We could share songs. Yeah, much better than fighting. Okay, any other questions about that?
I used once the word mana. Is that a Hawaiian word for karma?
No, it would be more like for energy, spiritual energy.
That's how I used to know it.
Yeah, so it's soul force, we might call it. But if you develop good mana, it creates positive karma. Yeah.
Related. Okay.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because, like, for example, in one computer game I used to play, League of Legends, it's a very popular one. There's this, like, you have your health bar and then you have this magical resource which is called mana in the game. So it's like the thing you need to cast spells, and then you need to, like, so it's been very popularized in. I don't know if it's in other games as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's
like
been adopted as a global word.
Yeah, for a magical resource you need to cast spells.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing, and we should all have plenty of mana and use it for good purposes. And use it for peace, and that's why I wrote my book on peace magic, which is about how to use positive mana for peacemaking. It's the first ever book on peace magic ever written. But anyway, thank you, that was beautiful. And now let's move to materialism, which is number 154, and it's part of the philosophy stable, because many great philosophers have used the label materialist to describe their beliefs, and it has a long and ancient and noble history. So I used to have long discussions with my mother, who would probably describe herself as a materialist. When I was growing up as a boy, she believed that dialectical materialism was the way to go, which was Karl Marx and Engels' interpretation of materialism, and they're one of the great materialist traditions. It goes back at least to Democritus in ancient Greece, who really invented atomic theory. Democritus, who spent time in Egypt, he believed that everything is made of tiny, tiny little things he called atoms, which then are different in different things. So in water, they're more loosely bound together. In hard matter, porcelain or metal, they're much more compacted. That's why they're dense. In air, they're very finely spread out. So really, he came up with atomic theory, like in 5th century BC, and was regarded as a sage because in the alchemical tradition, he's also regarded as one of the founders of alchemy. Meanwhile, in India, there was a chap called Charvaka, who came to the same view, interestingly, that everything is made of atoms, and that therefore you can explain the material phenomena of nature through studying the atomic structure of things. The idea was popularized by Leucippus in the West, and even Epicurus, the Greek philosopher in Athens, who argued that pleasure is the supreme duty of the human, both individually and collectively. We should be able to have lives of pleasure, including happiness, because intellectual and emotional pleasure are both happiness and aha moments. Enlightenment is a kind of pleasure for Epicurus, and it's caused by very fine atoms jiggling about, making the brain excited. And we don't know how it works. So Lucretius, a great Roman materialist philosopher who was inspired by Epicurus, wrote a poem on nature, which is one of the great epic poems of antiquity. He did believe in a goddess. He said behind matter there's a goddess. She presents to us as earth, air, fire and water and atoms, but there's a sort of spiritual thing behind matter which we can't see. It's not matter itself, it's the thing behind matter. And I take that view. I used to have this argument with my mother, a sort of friendly, polite family discussion. And when I discovered the Egyptian goddess of justice is called Ma'at, I always say, well, I'm a Ma'aterialist, because I believe in Ma'at, order, justice, truth, which is the goddess herself. And she weighs the soul with a feather after death. If we've not been honourable and truthful and kind during our life, then we get clobbered by the demons until we become so in our next life. So I think, like Pascal, that a little humility about this stuff is useful. So I think to just say materialism is the answer, I think is an intellectual error, but, many people have made that error. A.J. Ayer, for instance, he was a typical logical positivist in 19th century, 20th century philosophy. They felt that the job of philosophy is just logic, and that means ruling out anything metaphysical. No manners allowed, because you can't measure it, weigh it, see it. And so the logical positivists wanted to ban from all language any discussion of gods, spirits, subtle energies, invisible things, gods, goddesses. I ran into them at the University of Bristol and we had an encounter. And I would say that I think I'm probably their absolute bête noire. I'd be a nightmare for the logical positivists because I've gone deeply into the linguistics of spirituality. And I believe that that position of materialist logical positivism is simply intellectually wrong. It's an error. And I think I can prove it. I think, but I'm very willing to continue the discussion. In France, in the Enlightenment, La Mettrie and Holbach declared themselves materialist. They took the atomic theory seriously, and therefore they were very anti-Christianity. They were anti the idea of hell. They were anti the idea of life after death as a judgment thing, and they thought this was just being used to terrorize people, like a scam. So they were, for them, materialist atheism was a banner of resistance against corrupt religion. Now I can understand and relate to that, but I think that to then elevate, and that's where dialectical materialism came from. Marxism carries on with that hardcore revolutionary rejection of all spirituality as an oppressive tool of the ruling classes. And I've had this argument with Marxist intellectuals, even in Russia and elsewhere, and I think that the greatest Marxists never were actually vulgar materialists. I think there's a difference in a vulgar materialist who says there's only matter, that's it. No, there's mind, there's culture, there's art, there's beauty, there's feeling, there's music, there's meaning. Meaning cannot be extracted from matter. One of the great Marxist intellectuals, Lukács, kind of knew this. He was a Hungarian. That society itself takes on new forms of meaning and complexity, which are non-material. Ideas like I'm sharing now, they're not they're not material things, they're thought forms. But anyway, it's what state of play is that I think one has to suspend judgment on these things and research. I mean, I'm a great believer in physics, chemistry, science, exploring the material superstructure that life is made of. And I follow Aristotle in that, who was a sort of materialist himself, as all medicine doctors, healers have to be, and Aristotle came from a medical background. You want to heal the body, but simultaneously one should attend to the soul, as Plato taught. And that's why I belong to the Scientific and Medical Network. I don't think it's either matter or spirit. I think it's both and. Anyway, there's more detail in the book, and I think it's it's a rich and interesting tradition if you actually look into the history of materialism. But I think it's got its limitations. One of the mysteries relates to the evolution of life, the origin of life on this planet. There was a Russian scientist called Oparin who did experiments. He tried to create conditions that would have held on this planet millions and millions of years ago. And could life have arisen, the first cells, the first biological systems on this planet, through like lightning hitting some kind of soup on the
Big Bang.
Yeah, no, that's even further back. I mean, where did the Big Bang come from? That's a whole other story. But no, he was just playing around with where did life come on this planet, as in our biological systems. And they've never been able to reconstruct it. You cannot make life cells from irradiating, chemical soup with electricity. There's something else going on. And nowadays, I think advanced biologists are realizing it. But what that is still a mystery. I talk about the term divine intelligence because I find in life a kind of symmetry, a beauty, a patterning, even at the micro-atomic level, that to me shows evidence of order and intelligence rather than randomness and just coincidence. But anyway, I'll look forward to coming back and taking a life 500 years from now, and I'll see what science has come up with to explain all these mysteries. What I'm against is dissolving matter. I love matter. I don't want to dissolve it prematurely by releasing fission bombs and fusion bombs and nuclear weapons all over the place. Because inside matter is this incredible energy stored and charged. I'm pleased the Chinese have just found a way to make fusion power work, apparently. We've got to find a way to create energy without dissolving atoms into nuclear explosions. And, it's important that we do it together as a planet and peacefully. The French have had research into what actually is inside atoms and how you can release it. That's a big thing. But release it for peace, not for war, is my plea to humanity. Okay, I'll stop there. Any comments or questions?
One of you, maybe? I have one, but I don't want to.
You go first.
Okie dokie. This box reminds me of something you told me some time ago. How subjective and objective swept.
They flipped.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, in medieval discourse in Europe here, things are real if they were subjective, because they came from the inner subject, the thinker, the mind. So if you went to study at the University of Paris and you gave a response to a teacher, and if he didn't like it, he'd say, "Oh, that's just objective," meaning it's just on the surface. Whereas if you said something that was truly from your soul and related to the divine mind, well, that was subjective. And that had real weight and meaning and power. It had mana, to use the Hawaiian phrase. And that's what used to prevail here in Europe in medieval universities. It still does in little pockets of religious studies departments where I've taught. But in mainstream academia, it's been flipped. So things that are subjective are now regarded as ghosts, chimeras, not really important. Only objective truth is important. And that's just an ironic twist of language. But, well remembered that. That I learned from a great British Christian socialist called Raymond Williams, who wrote a book called Keywords, who I met back in the 80s. He's a professor of culture at Cambridge University. And he, like me, was fascinated by the inner history of words. And they do this thing over their journey of sometimes having the opposite meaning. Like the word wicked used to mean really bad, like don't go there. Now in street slang, something's wicked. It's like really cool, that's wicked, mate. Meaning that's great. So things are always changing like a mirror. Yes. Mari, you chose materialism.
Yeah.
What do you want to add?
I think I long had a problem with this word, or like how people use it, because often Western capitalist society is described as material, while I see that it's not materialistic enough. I think our connection to materia is exactly what we have lost, and our respect for materia, such as the resources of this planet, or the connection within to our own bodies or the other living beings, the respect for trees and birds and winds and all that sort of thing. I think that is exactly what we are missing, and I always find myself confused when people are like criticizing the world as materialistic or seeing materialism as the problem of the world, while I think the world would look very different if we were actually looking at the materia and respecting the materia, which I see as sacred. And also, like in many indigenous wisdoms, it's the deities are connected to the materia itself, and the spirit is within the materia, and every materia has spirit. And I see a materialistic mindset myself as a very, very magical one and very wonderful one. Like there's a lot of, it's extremely spiritual to me just to be with the land or be with a tree or something like that. And I just have this long-standing issue with the word materialism, because I guess I just don't understand what people mean when they use it, because I think we are disconnected from the materia. That's our problem. That's how I see it. And then also, like, if we really think that everything there is that is matter, then the meaning must be in the matter, and the well-being of the matter, well-being of the living beings. And also, if we really thought that way, the world will look so different. So this is why I said to you the other day that the problem is not that we are materialistic, the problem is that we're not materialistic enough. Part of which, of course, is that we use this word materialistic as, well, there's all these traditional, these thinkers that have been described in the school, and then their leanings and all of that. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you for that. That's very, very profound. I would agree with you. I would say, as we talk about shallow ecology and deep ecology, so we can talk about shallow materialism and deep materialism. What you're talking about is deep materialism, and you're using the word materia, which is the Latin. I'd like to point out the etymology of this term, which I've studied in depth, is related to mother. Mater, mater in Latin. So matter is the mother of all of us. We come from the mother's womb, the matter that we were given to have bodies. We are all material beings, thanks to the Great Mother. And all the indigenous religions honour that. Pachamama, they call it in Latin America, whatever. Keridwen in the Celtic world. I mean, and in Finland, I'm sure you have a word for the Earth Mother. So she is sacred, and that's the true materia. And alchemists work with her, and true sages of all times, like Zosimus, who was the first great alchemist. But what we've got is superficial materialism, which was, you know, clever scientists thinking that they know it all. That's arrogance of hubris. And that got wedded to the whole technological advance and the scientific technological revolution that then went out and desecrated nature and forgot that she is
For the
our
false
material.
side of money, which is a completely fabricated tale, it's an illusion.
Yeah, for the false, well, money symbolises power, so it's the false worship of power by mostly men in companies, you know, going out and enslaving indigenous people in the Americas or Africa or whatever, or indeed in Europe. So the original Sami and the wisdom keepers, the Druids and so on, were also ridiculed. In British culture, it's very, you know, London is the haven of anti-spiritual, marginal peoples in the name of capitalist profit-making, which is, you know, the power of the empire.
Which is false materialism, I would say, because when you're trying
Yeah.
to make money, you're not really connected to material, because money is just a complete delusion. It's an illusion.
It's an illusion which works
value that
only as long as
doesn't
people
exist.
buy into it, and
Yeah.
it works on fear. So you know, if you don't have the money in the bank, you know, it's all about fear. So that I think was the good bit of Marx's critique, and I bless my mother for, you know, bringing me up in slightly in that tradition, although she was a philosophical Marxist, and on the, but she did. I think that was Marx's point, that if you worship capitalism as an end in itself, and you benefit from the power, then you're endangering the actual material. And I think that what Engels meant by dialectical materialism was deep materialism. And for instance, he was greatly influenced by the Iroquois people of North America, Deganawida even, their communitarian lifestyle, living with sanctity of nature, harmony of nature in the tribe. That was what they meant by communism. And it's what the early French intellectuals like Pierre Leroux meant, who was the mayor of my local town, Boussac. They wanted a society that honoured materia and each other equally, which is how indigenous people have always lived.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of what became called Marxism, I don't think Marx himself would have recognised it. It was a tragedy. So we have to deconstruct that. And when I went to Moscow and met these very advanced Russian intellectual philosophers who'd been, you know, teaching Marxism for years, we had honest, deep conversations about all this. And they said, yeah, we have to find a new language.
Yeah.
And some of their greatest intellectuals and philosophers were working towards it.
Yeah, and this like school of thinking that I'm describing is, I think it's currently mostly called in philosophy new materialism. But I would like to, in this occasion, I would like to coin a new term which describes my worldview and maybe my religion as well, which would be sacred materialism. I'm just gonna let you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna drop that
We've
here right
heard
now.
it here.
Sacred materialism. Also, is it alright if I smoke here?
Go for it,
Hi.
yes, yeah. We always have at least one smoker in the philosophy club.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Usually
will
it's our
take
Mel. Yes. Yes, and that's, you know, that's the American Indian way of honouring the sacred smoke that rises to spirit. So look, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing sacred materialism. And yeah, I can relate to that. Now let's invoke the gods finally for our last little thing here. They've been present, but not, you know, specifically invoked. Let's see who's going to come today. Yes. So we'll do what we did. We'll pass them around differently. So I'll hand them for you. You choose one.
Thank you.
And then you do one for Mari.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
So, Apollo,
that's a
we
good
had them sometime, right?
That's fine. We can always have Apollo. And then if you spray them out for her to choose,
Here goes.
because she seems to have adopted your knees.
Yes, I hope